one you've all been waiting for.
Have you had a good con so far? Great weekend? Yeah.
Why don't you show some volume, some applause. Well, I am excited here. I wish that we could just have Tim Capello be just playing all around right now and fucking just jamming out. Oh, we're having fun to get the energy going. But we'll bring the energy. I am Michael Rothman of Bloody Disgusting and Halloweenies, a horror franchise podcast.
And I am Shelby Novak of the Scary to Sleep podcast and the Bloody Disgusting podcast.
Oh yeah, so who here likes horror movies? Right.
Not many of you.
We got a pretty good one. I don't know if
it's okay. You know, it's only transcended time.
Yeah. It's a little DIY venture called The Lost Boys. And we've got the cast here. Jason Patric. You can go louder, come on. Alex Winter. Billy Wirth. Newlander, and Michael Corbitt.
All right, look at these fancy microphones we have.
Hi guys, how are you all doing today?
Good.
Good.
Hey, everybody. Hey.
Check. Coming up.
All right. What if you had said, not good day?
Yeah.
That wouldn't be
The next
acceptable.
30 minutes is just
This is a safe space, you can tell us. That's fine.
He told us it was 5 minutes.
Well, look, I think we're all here hanging out today, but look, we wouldn't be here if this movie wasn't like the greatest horror hang of all time. I mean, there's a reason why this is one of the most rewatchable movies of all time. It's just, you'd have the worst day ever. You put it on and you're like, okay, we're good.
It makes you feel cool.
Yeah.
You feel cool.
It's just aesthetic heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Was the vibe like that on set? What was the vibe behind the scenes? Was it as cool? Was it as fun?
I mean, for the vampires, I think, I don't know if cool, I don't know if you mark yourself as being cool, but the experience was cool just because we were sleeping all day and getting up at night and riding motorcycles around on the boardwalk, and so that part of it was cool.
The vibe, the whole thing, up in Santa Cruz with all the locals, and
I've heard rumors that there were hordes of fans who would watch you guys on the boardwalk.
and they were in the movie, a lot of them too.
Yeah.
That's
They were
true.
just the local.
That must have felt different than normal film sets. I mean, having an audience.
Yeah, I mean, on the boardwalk that second night, I think we were there. It was like we were the circus that came to town. The big 10K lights and the motorcycles and the vibe. It was just, it was pretty awesome. And I was just starting out in film, and I was like, wow, if this is what this is, I want to do this.
Yeah, films like this. I found that it was a lot of fun on the set. I was talking to V. Neal, who did the makeup for Lost Boys, and she, for the vampires especially, and I just felt like they were having such a blast.
Mm-hmm.
V was having a great time, Joel was having a great time, because they were sort of creating this vision and super excited about it. So that was the vibe for me, is that everybody was having a blast.
Yeah, the makeup is such a fundamental part of the movie too. It was the first time I feel like vampires there was a good balance between sexy and scary. It really hit that rock star vibe. And since then, a lot of different vampire franchises have definitely ripped from the Lost Boys
Yes, indeed.
vampire design.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit too, because there is something to be said about this there's sex appeal in this, and on all sides, and it's not even just it's not just the vampires. It's the whole movie uses sex, and was that a big part? I mean, I know
You're making the audience uncomfortable.
But it does. I mean, come on. Tim Capello just sweaty and just it looks like he just got.
That was Jason's department. So.
Yeah.
I was having a lot of sex, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Joel Schumacher came up in New York in fashion, and he had that, sensibility, and he really brought the music, which was, In Excess, and all these great, cool songs, and the time. It was the '80s, so I think he captured that sort of feel, and then, you know, with Jason working on the script and they elevated it from what it originally was. I mean, it was definitely an aesthetic of sexy, cool, you know, party all night.
You know, I was 10 years old and I didn't realize what it was until I got some fan letters.
Oh my God.
And then I'm like, oh, awesome.
Well, I kind of wanted to bring that up because it's like I mean, one of the genius aspects of this film, and I think one of the reasons why it's so timeless, is that, you know, you really do have this triptych of just like, all right, you have the adults. I mean, you have Diane Lacey who's coming off of an Oscar and is leading the cast for the adults there, and then you also have 20-something, you know, late teen 20-somethings that on that end. Then you also have, you know, the Frog Brothers where it's like the kids there, and then even with the kid vampires there. So it's like you really cover the gamut of everything. So it's like you come into this movie, you can kind of relate to it. And I, you know, going over these questions, I was like, yeah, you were like 10. So were you like coming back to school and like, I mean, also, and not only that, you're 10 on this cool set, but you're also with the coolest people in the world. And especially in your demo, so it's,
He was pretty badass.
Chance, I was scared to death because I had Chance on my bike. I had something to do, and he was a badass, man.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
he
you're
knows
very,
what's going on.
very
He
nice.
remembers everything. I mean,
Well, you know, I was telling folks today, and I said, you know, do you remember? I remember everything, and I remember, you know, specifically about this movie. Look, you know, the very first scene that we did, or at least I did, and I'm sure it was yours too, is when we were sitting on the porch, and then, you know, Sam and Jason's character Michael, they were running to get in that nook because the vampires were coming to get them. And if you go back and look, and I still look at this, I remember Joel was very free. He let us kind of do what we were doing. So I know Jameis and I were laughing when we were supposed to be scared. So go back and look at it. I mean, we're laughing because we had zero clue. Yeah, you were. Trust me.
I don't think I was laughing.
Trust me. I promise you. But what I mean by that is that, look, you know, I've done other projects after that where the director was very strict, very stern, and Joel, for me at least, wasn't that. And so it was very freeing for a 10-year-old, and to have, you know, Jamie and Jason and Billy, really, you know, I was on his back most of the time, you know, hanging on it. They were very protective. So for a 10-year-old, it was cool, it was sexy, it was amazing. And for me in particular, it changed my life, because when you do a movie like this for your first time, the doors kind of don't just open, they slam open. And it went really, really crazy. It went from my dad pursuing sort of his dream to chasing me around, and, you know, it was a freaking amazing, you know, run. So I love this movie for a lot
That's
of
amazing.
reasons.
You know, you
Yeah.
mentioned this, you were new to this, so I wanted to ask all of you actually, because just the scope of this movie, what was the audition process like? Did you know what kind of movie you were going in for, and was there anything, like, any stories from the audition process?
I didn't think the movie was about vampires as much as it is, you know, because in auditioning the scenes were the Emersons and the Frog Brothers and stuff, so I thought that was more what the movie was about, you know. But I met Feldman in the audition process. They paired us up. It was cool.
I read for Joel and Dick Donner, Joel Schumacher, Dick Donner in New York City, and you know, I was new to this whole game, and went in, probably tanked the audition, but Joel said, well, you're not going to play David, but we're going to put you in, and this is going to change your life, or whatever. And Brooke McCarter, we had the same agent, and he read for it, and he was out in California by this time, but we became great friends and bonded when I came out to LA. But the audition process was pretty easy. For me, I didn't get to meet
Marion Doherty?
Marion
Yeah.
Doherty, who's the casting of all casting agents, but
Yeah, well, but that was like a weird random thing, as I was at Warner Brothers for something else, and she pulled me into her office, and we had this conversation. She said, I want you to meet with Joel Schumacher on this movie. And I also met him, because I lived in New York, so I had him back in New York with Donner. And I don't know, but you know, it was one of the easier audition processes in a way, because Joel knew what he wanted. So like from the moment I went in, just felt like you kind of know when you're sort of already part of the fabric of a show sometimes. It was like, oh, this is kind of happening already. It wasn't hard. And he was just really very pointed and specific, and you got a lot of his time. But unlike Unlike Jameson, I thought it was only about us.
He thought it was a Frog Brother movie. Don't
Yeah,
forget.
I mean, it's like, it was making
Still
me
does.
called Lost Boys, I was like, yeah. So I was like, what do you mean I don't have any dialogue? What do you mean I gotta put these hair extension in? What the hell? What did I sign up for? I guess that's your second question, was like, no, none of us knew what the movie was.
Yeah.
No, because the script was, I mean, you know, to Billy's point, Jason was working on it already, like, and working on the character, but for us, we didn't really know, like, it was written very differently than what we made, so it was written, we were more like kind of the Brando rebel writers writing kind of old triumphs with black leather jackets. It wasn't sort of glam in the way it became. So it was, I had the same sort of reaction you did. I was super into it, but I didn't exactly know what we were doing. Like not like I didn't know how to act or like I was lost, but I didn't know exactly what his movie was for a bit.
But you trusted him.
But I totally trusted Jordan. Yeah, yeah. It was also fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. The process was so much fun that I didn't really care so much. I just sort of handed myself over.
Yeah,
to his vision.
I was wondering about that, just working with Joel Schumacher. You know, he became the king of camp and whimsy, and I was wondering if he was like that as a director.
I don't know. I mean, he was a serious artist though, and you know, had come out of fashion and had worked with Woody Allen and done so many impressive things. And the rest of the crew, department heads on that movie were so high level. You know, Mike Chapman and Bo Welch and Susie Becker, like, these were super high level people that had done incredible things. So there was a seriousness to Joel, even though there was a kind of a familial inclusiveness to him. So I wouldn't call him camp in that way. Like, I know what you mean in terms of his sensibilities, but he wasn't a light person.
Right.
He was a pretty serious
Fighter too, right?
Yeah, and he was fighting the studio a
Yeah.
lot. And it wasn't like, I've been on sets that are. I mean, Bill and Ted's set was like very light. Everyone was laughing, and it was, you know, whatever. Lost Boys, he had a lot of pressure on him, and had a very specific idea for what he wanted to do, and he had to kind of fight all the way through. So that set. I mean, you know, I'm sure this happened to you. Like, we went to see him during lunch to discuss anything, and he was in his trailer. He always looked like he had the weight of the fucking world on his shoulders. You know, you open, he'd be sitting there like hunched over his food, like, looking like a general in a tent, like, and he's not winning.
That's funny.
He would bring that pressure to the actor.
That's what I mean. You wouldn't see it on the set.
Right, not to you guys.
Yeah, we just had to look cute. not fall off our bikes. Which
See, I mean, the thing is that you've all grown up with the movie. Your parents passed it down. It's been 40 years later. But you have to understand that in 1986, none of this had happened before. There was never this makeup. There was never those practical effects. There was never the meshing of comedy and humor and the sort of pathos of growing up. That none of that ever happened. So I mean, those guys had that audition process. I went into audition because I hadn't had a movie come out ever, and this Marindarity, and I went in. I would do that sometimes just for practice, like, you know, you got to try to do something. And you know, I don't. It's been said many times before, but I turned the movie down many, many times. And the reason is, everyone says, why would you turn that Lost Boys down? Well, because it wasn't Lost Boys. It became Lost Boys every day through people's contributions.
Totally.
And, you know, Joel, I always say I was 19 years old and it's a studio movie, never had a movie out, and here Joel said, you know, he wouldn't let it go.
Yeah.
He just said, well, this is your part until I have to start filming. And then he always asked me to come over to Warner Brothers and we take these long walks to go eat. And he said, look, I'm going to build this movie around you. You're going to have the freedom to do your characters and your dialogue. And that's a great thing, but it's also a lot of pressure for a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
So, because what we did agree on, and I still think the movie works, the real spine of that movie is the relationship between Michael and Sam. If that doesn't work, all these spectacular things, which are amazing, that's nothing. Then it is campy and flourish. But if that works, that reality, and that's what I talked to him about. And when he said, yeah, I agree with you, and I want you to be able to create that. That was a wonderful thing. 19-year-olds don't get to write their dialogue and have a big say in a big movie like that.
How
He
did
gave
you know
me that.
so much about story and this idea at such a young age? Had you studied it?
Well, my dad was a playwright, so
Very celebrated one.
yeah,
Pulitzer Prize.
so I always knew about material, and I just thought early on that's what was going to always separate us, good material, and that is the case.
And then having Diane Wiest, I mean, like,
That's my mother.
yeah. I mean,
So in those scenes with Diane
Bernard
Wiest,
Hughes.
we're not in a vampire movie. It's an Academy Award-winning actress talking to her son who doesn't want to be home anymore.
Yeah.
I played it as if we're doing, that's a Woody Allen movie or anything else. I want to get out of here.
You mentioned the connection though with Joel working on the Woody Allen movies. Is that how they managed to get Diane to get on this? And also, I mean, like, because Edward Herrmann was also
Yeah, I knew it from the theater scene. No, Joel came up in New York and had a lot of respect from the New York arts community. So he knew a lot of people wanted to work with him and sort of knew that what he was, and it was a big Warner Brothers movie, and everyone likes to eat and work, and it wasn't like, not like a lot of people were asking Diane Wiest to be in kind of mainstreamy type movies. I think it was
Still a big score because, he's pitching, again, like I said, a teen vampire movie that someone just won an Oscar. And again, it's not Lost Boys.
Yeah.
It'd be some of the piece of shit you never see
Exactly.
come out of it. But he's very, very charming. Very,
he
very
got me to
good.
drop out of film school. I dropped out of college because of Joel.
Well, good thing
Put
I
on leather chaps and hair extensions.
I look always back though at because people say, oh, this is an 80s movie, but I think people forget that it takes a long time for a decade to kind of figure itself out. You go watch The Changeling in 1980, that's in the 70s movie. Or you can watch Caddyshack, it feels like a 70s movie. But 87, 86, you kind of had a portrait of what the 80s were like. And what I think is cool about this film is that it has the hallmarks of that decade, but I would argue this film feels like it's a foreshadowing of the 90s. You watch it, I was watching it last night, and the cuts, the way that you interplay with the way that the adults are taken more seriously, it's not like a John Hughes production where it's the adults are kind of the goofy, the Ferris's dad dancing and not knowing his son's downstairs. There's real drama here. I mean, even when it's 3 times the charm for us having a dinner date, it's treated serious. I mean, and I do think that was kind of foreshadowing where film of this type is going to go. And I wondered if that was part of the development, taking it from being kind of just a bunch of kids with vampires and taking it to another level. Did you see that development happening, especially Jason, you're working with Joel? Is that something that you guys were kind of bringing the severity into it? Was that the biggest part?
Yeah, but I would say exactly the things you're talking. But I said you can make these movies. The reason The Exorcist works is that you believe. It doesn't matter if that girl is possessed by a devil or that's heroin. That mother is seeing her daughter. That's her daughter. She can do anything she can to save that daughter. If you play into the supernatural right away, which is what every movie does now, from every Marvel movie, every scary movie, the second there's a creak in the door, they want to let you know you're in a scary movie, even though you just paid to go to a fucking scary movie. You must play against that. You have to look for the reality of all that kind of stuff. And The Exorcist works because the priest, the mother, no one believes that this is a possession. So then it becomes a human drama and it becomes real. And that's what I talked to Joel about. I said, I'm playing a 19-year-old or whatever, 18-year-old. He's ready to leave the house, but his mom's divorced and he's got to take care of the brother. He doesn't want to assume that role. Then you get in a situation with a lot of cool people and outsiders, and the whole blood thing is just a drug analogy that I use. So if I do that, he can do the other stuff. Because he would nod his head and type, everything I said. But at the end of the day, but it is going to be Teen Vampire. I said, no problem.
Yeah.
As long as I don't have to wear makeup or fangs. And he said, you don't. He said, you don't.
Oops. But he did have a different sensibility than Donner. Donner had made Goonies, and I love Richard Donner's movies. He made that the Incredible Superman movie that he did. But Joel's sensibility was a bit more grounded just because of his New York background, and so he brought that. That's the thing, he could marry the sort of Baroque operatic stuff, rock and roll stuff, with a more grounded approach. And so the script had gone from being, the earlier scripts I read were more Goonies-like.
Oh yeah.
They were young. The whole thing had a much younger, goofier vibe, and a lot of that got sort of sanded down as it went, which was good.
And also with the Frog Brothers, I didn't really realize it was comedy, kind of, because he was so. He had us be really serious. I mean, that's how he played it. We weren't winking to camera at all. I was very serious, you know, and I feel like he did that all over the movie.
That's why it was so funny.
Right. I mean, that way. Yeah, it was in the middle of the movie, and Brooke McCarter was like, "Oh yeah, you guys are a little comedic relief," and I was like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like Chuck Norris over here.
That's wild to know. Like, I would have never had any idea. Yeah, that's incredible.
And Corey Feldman was more with like a Stallone or whatever, right?
Yeah. I was like more of like a Chuck Norris, and he was more of a Stallone. That's what it felt. That's what Schumacher said. Joel was like, watch those movies, watch Charles Bronson, watch these guys, and do that.
That makes so much sense now. Yeah.
Like Joel was great with and Alex and said balancing all these different things.
Right.
He would talk differently to different people. He knew what they were going to be, and he did tell those guys, "You're Stallone, you're Norris, play this dead straight." He'd know it. But then and when we do stuff together, he'd say, "Yeah, they think they're Stallone Norris, but they're morons." I mean, you'd never tell them that, and so you see him playing.
And all he told me was just to do nothing and just be in the moment.
Be sexy.
He said, "We'll find you. Don't try to find the camera." And just it gave me a lot of freedom just to not do anything but be present and listen and take it in.
It worked. It gave your character a sense of cool. Like, you really weren't in a movie. You were just being you.
Yeah.
So that really worked.
It gave me a lot of relief because I really was new to this whole thing and I was scared, but to have to just be present, that's all he said. It will find you, don't worry about where you are. So I just connected with Brooke and what was going on around me. And had I had any more, I don't know if I could have done any more, but it was great. Just as the first movie to have, to work with these amazing talents, it was quite a entry into the business. It was great.
So Jameson, was there any anxiety about coming into the movie to work with the two Coreys?
It's funny. I was.
You weren't the two Corys yet.
Became so.
So no.
They were both. I mean, Feldman had done Goonies, Haim had done Lucas.
Yeah.
And honestly, the Coreys were so sweet and so welcoming and so giving to me.
Great.
It was incredible. We got close. There was no like I'm a star and you're not. Nothing like that. It was just great. So I mean, I was nervous. I was really nervous because I had a lot of stuff to do, and I acted a bunch, and I thought I was Mr. Actorman, but I hadn't had that much dialogue in the movie, so I was really nervous. But kept it cool and everything, and the Coreys and Joel, they were just awesome, so welcoming and giving. It was great.
Amazing.
Yeah, I just wondered, like, they're like, who's this guy or something? And you're like, Corey, I think it was shoot a scene with them, or like, because it just feels like at that age, kids can be just.
Clicky.
Yeah, right?
They could have been. I think it's their nature. I mean, I know like Feldman and Haim are different, and Feldman can be a little bit getting the fame kind of to his head sometimes, and but it personally and also as a fellow artist, they were just great.
No.
They were just amazing. Yeah.
Well, I know, the elephant in the room with the year before Stand By Me hits. And I had done some oral history work on that, and a lot of the kids that were on that set were like, "Man, Kiefer Sutherland scared the shit out of us."
Really?
And so I wondered, like, was that the kind of horror he brought to this set? Like, I remember like Jerry O'Connell being like, "Yeah, I didn't want him to see him because I thought he was gonna kick my ass the entire time." So it was like a year later. So I just wondered if that was kind of like, did he have that sort of?
No.
No. All right. Okay. Good.
But I didn't Kiefer and I didn't exchange that many words with him.
Yeah.
And like, there's only two things that I remember about Kiefer is when he was talking to the special effects guys about biting that bald guy's head. He was like, "What I want to do with that bald guy is I want to bite his head." That's how I overheard that. That was cool.
Yeah.
What was it like filming in June? I know you filmed a lot of this in the summer with those. I mean, not all of you, but a lot of you were in pretty hefty outfits and leather and.
It wasn't that bad.
Oh.
Santa Cruz is on the coast, so
That's
it wasn't
true.
that hot. And we weren't in like the prosthetics that we were wearing were incredibly light. That was sort of the innovation that Greg Cannon had come up with V. which was something that could be applied really quickly to save them time, and also that it looked as minimal as possible. So we weren't like under like huge, which I've done a bunch of other times, huge amounts of prosthetics. That can get quite hot. So no, I didn't have any, I don't remember. My coat was certainly hot, but it wasn't really a hot, Santa Cruz wasn't hot per se. It was usually pretty temperate.
Your coat was exactly what I thought of, actually. Was that-
Yeah,
that's
it was
so cool.
like wearing a giant blanket. Yeah, mini rugs. But no, I don't ever remember being, I mean, I remember like having the two Corys kicking sand into my eyes at my desk and being rushed to the hospital with a scratched cornea.
Oh
my God.
Wow.
But the heat wasn't an issue. The contact lenses we wore, those were an issue. Yeah.
And also there's makeup. The makeup people are always right there and like fanning you and putting, dabbing any sweat that might be there and, putting more sweat on you.
Joel got mad at me for getting a suntan, but
I got yelled at for something.
yeah.
You are especially tan in the movie, I will say, so I can see, it's funny. It
Because
works.
we worked on the weekend. We worked on the weekend, so all week long we were just hanging at the hotel and on the beach. And I got to set, and they're like, "Maybe don't spend so much time in the sun."
Here's a Nintendo, go have some fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of just the looks and what you were wearing, did any of you have much say in your looks, and is your personality in the look we see on screen?
Susan Becker had a budget. She was a costume designer. Joel said, take these guys out to Melrose and pick some things out. So we picked a bunch of stuff out. We all had a hand in that, and we tried on some stuff, took the photos, sent them back to Joel, and he just said, cool, yeah. So we created our own costumes.
Wow.
So we could rate.
Yeah.
I don't know how you guys
I
did
didn't.
that.
Yeah, I didn't, because I'd been wearing like a t-shirt and a black motorcycle jacket. But I got to wardrobe for some reason before everyone else, and I think I'd gone there for another meeting, and they said, "Oh, go talk to Susie." And so I went across to her office, and I knew she was pretty famous, and her husband was also a very famous director, so I was pretty excited to meet her. And she had all these clothes laid out on the floor. She said, "Well, you're lucky because you're the first person here. What do you want?" I was like, "I'm taking that jacket." She said, "You'd be a fool not to take that jacket." And they just built the rest of the outfit around the jacket.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. Somebody was asking me about the laddie's coat today, and I still don't even know what it is. Civil War, is it a bellhop? And somebody said maybe it's a drummer boy from, I don't know. But we were in there. I remember it was very vivid memory. It was. I think there was 5 of us. I don't know. I think Kiefer, Brooke. I think you were even there in this room, and we're just trying on a bunch of different things. And I had on a leather jacket, and all of a sudden, she put this drummer boy jacket on, rolled up the sleeves because it was about that far too long, because everything that I tried on was too big because I was just tiny. She grabbed a shoestring and tied it to the pant leg, and so it's hanging, and Converse said, "That's it, go away." It was that quick, but ultimately, I mean, really just still trying to find the jacket, actually. The jacket was badass.
And also this shirt, this is my dad's army jacket, actual army jacket, and they recreated it. I wore this to the audition because I used to wear military stuff. I just was I liked it, and so I wore this to the audition. They just totally recreated it for the movie.
Wow.
Yeah, so
That's incredible.
Did the rest of you get to keep any of?
Yeah, I got the jacket.
Yeah.
I got 2 of them actually.
Oh,
Were you supposed to have 2 of them, or?
We had 6 because
We had
of
stunt
stunts,
doubles.
explosions, different things.
For sure.
Yeah, they do that in movies, so it's like if you blow the jacket, you don't have to like go create a new one. They've got another one right there.
I learned that in like Curb Enthusiasm. Like Larry loses the jacket, and it's like we keep copies of everyone's, and the whole episode is him trying to find it. Anyway, plug for HBO Max. I want to ask about the doors. So I feel like everyone that's in the middle school, high school, they all have the doors there. I was obsessed with the doors to the point it was my personality, and a lot of it is a credit to this movie. And I know there's the Echo cover, and there's the mural, and even Jason's look. There's even just the crossfade and from the Morse thing into his face. Like, why? Where did this start? Like, was it just did they have a comeback in the '80s? Like around the late '80s, or like was there someone on set who was like, look, we got to get Morrison in this? Like, what was the impetus?
That's all?
It was Bo, but it was also, there was this kind of rock and roll, kind of misfit rock and roll thing that Joel was playing with. And Morrison, emblematizes that. You probably know, I don't know how big a post-punk person you are, but Echo was obsessed with the Doors.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
So that made total sense that was what they would want to do with it. But originally, the way Bo designed the hotel set or cave, can you even see the Morrison in there?
In the cave, well, yeah, because they do some Passover.
Because it was
stuff.
very present on set.
Yeah.
It was like he was like the centerpiece of the set, but the way Chapman lit it was so dark, and it was probably a good thing, but it sort of became less of a centerpiece. I think it was just this idea of kind of rock and roll misfits and like they were all tapped into this idea of what had happened at the end of the 60s and like how dark it got and how everyone in Northern California sort of scattered at that time, late 60s, early 70s. So it became, because we were sort of like street kids, basically. That was like it wasn't like we got solid backstory where that seemed an easy inference, you know? So this notion of kind of the death of the rock and roll gone bad.
Yeah.
When
you're carrying it on.
The death of the dream, exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
There's a thread of that through it. That's in like some of the art department and the idea of kind of post-Manson of like Northern California and California is getting dangerous.
Yeah, oh, that's perfect.
Right. So, I mean, I think a lot of that is Bo, but certainly Joel is very smart and tapped into a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But in Santa Cruz too, there were real, like actual still hippie communities in Santa Cruz at the time, which is how the parents, the frog parents, he just grabbed them out.
Right. Yeah. The people who migrated out of San Francisco, out of the hate.
It was a semi-dark feeling up there too, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
There still is. Yeah.
It gets creepy at night, I will say. We went. My wife and I went over the summer, and I was geeking out. I was not just for this, but also I'm a Clint Eastwood fan. So I was like, "Oh, the sudden death occurs." And she was just like, "This is also Lost Boys," and so we're trying to recreate two opposite things there. But at night, it gets really eerie, and it's not just obviously the callback to like going to the parking lot and the opening shot and stuff, but like when you are driving through that town. The fog comes in and you forget that like, oh yeah, no, there's a forest out here. It's kind of eerie, and it's so I wondered like, did you get to explore the town a little bit when you were out there? Or I mean, I imagine you had to get sick of the boardwalk at some point. Or like, if I see the fucking blinking lights,
I don't know. I picked up a girlfriend and moved into her house while I was out. With her mom and dad, I want to add. Wow.
I said a lot of per diem.
It worked in my favor. Yeah, I was carrying a load. I picked up their health insurance.
Adopted them.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time. We had more time. I mean, Jason was in every flipping scene, so he didn't have any time. But we got, me and Brooke got up to moseying around, and we saw stuff. But I really got out into Santa Cruz. I stayed up there when the crew moved back to LA and came back later for the rest of the shoot.
Joel would force call us, which when we weren't even working, he'd bring us into set just to sit around and have the vibe of us around. But I think he was just trying to keep us out of trouble.
There was a little of that too. Yeah.
Well, we've talked about the music for the movie a lot. How do you all feel about the announcement of the Lost Boys musical?
I love it.
Do any of you have plans to see it?
I'd like
Definitely.
To
Yeah.
I'm hoping though.
I think it's a good thing to bring this to Broadway. A rock and roll musical. I mean, if they crush it, it'd be awesome.
See yourselves.
I think it lends itself to big rock opera.
I agree. I mean, the music is iconic from the movie itself, and I'm really interested to see how some of these scenes get turned into ballads or.
And I was talking to someone at the table, they might even be out here, but about how they wouldn't necessarily go to see a Broadway show, but they'll go to New York and see that show. So I think that makes sense. They're pulling in audience that they're not used to having there. So I think that's great.
They can keep the edge,
They can keep the edge, yeah.
Definitely.
Well, the soundtrack of the film is so interesting too, because I'm always, the song gets stuck in your head so fast. Either one, like the Tim Capello, or even Cry Little Sister, but like it's a unique soundtrack because it's not exactly specifically all 80s. I mean, you have like Roger Daltrey on there at one point. So I'm like, you have so many kids on set. Did they come to you and be like, all right, what are you guys liking right now? Like,
Joel was so tapped into culture.
Yeah,
he was friends with NXS and like he was so tapped into culture. of all the directors I worked with, I think, you know, often you have these like super hip music supervisors on set, even on like a Tarantino movie, and like Joel didn't need any of that.
Yeah.
You know, he was just very dialed into things that were going on. I mean, he took advice from people, but you look at that movie, I mean, Jason kind of said it, but like that movie is such a hybrid, idiosyncratic mix of things that shouldn't work together that do. He just has such a specific vision for what he's doing. And the music was so important to him. You know, Brooke and I were playing music, and we were like playing him stuff, and there was a lot of music kind of going on during the making of it. Because he talked to us a lot. He knew I'm a huge Echo fan, so he was talking to me a lot about like who they were getting and what they were doing, and a lot of excitement about the bands that he was pulling in. And you're right, like musically it was a kind of a watershed soundtrack in that it dictated a lot of what came after in that style, including Bill and Ted, and sort of what we did with our soundtracks. Took a page from that.
Do you ever hear any of the songs come on? You're like turn it up a little bit. In
The Echo one, I mean, I hate to be sacrilegious. I prefer that version to the original.
I do too, actually.
I like the Echo.
I just think it's a better song in their hands.
Yeah.
But not that would be the case with every Doors song, but that one in particular is very fitted to them. The NXS song always makes me happy when I hear it.
That's my favorite, the NXS one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I Kiss Cry Little Sister is my favorite, but
Yeah. So.
Well, he also, Joel was coming off of St. Elmo's Fire, and that had a good soundtrack itself
Yeah,
for the,
sure
you know,
did.
so.
Did he work on Car Wash?
He wrote Car
He
Wash.
wrote Car
Yeah.
Wash, yeah, that had
Yep.
a lot of music, right?
Yeah.
That was a cool movie, actually. Kyle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been over 35 years since the movie came out. And how do you all feel about horror as a genre today, as opposed to the 80s? It was such a different kind of, these horror in the 80s, horror now is so different. And do you enjoy horror today? Do you wish there had a little more of what you captured back then?
No, I think it's just, for me, I think it's just change, you know, it's back then it was edgy and, you know, it was a rated R movie. Like, that was an R movie. Like,
Yeah, it was.
now it's like G-rated, you know, if you really genuinely think about it. So, no, I think, you know, the kids today like what they like. And, you know, I'm going to be the old crabby guy that says, no, it's too much of this and too much of that. You know, young whipper, like, it is what it is. You know, when I was coming up, we liked, you know, I was telling somebody, you know, I went and I saw Guar, and I was at the Hollywood Palladium, and Bad Religion and Body Count and all these really cool things that my parents were like, what the hell are you listening to? Like, honestly, what are you listening to? And now I do the same thing with my kids. I'm like, what the hell are you listening to? What is that? So I don't
There's
think...
that Taylor Swift.
Well, yeah, she's taking over the world, right? But I think it's just, I don't necessarily have an opinion, negative or positive. I just think it's natural progression of
But also, Lost Boys was a comedy. I'm sorry, but it's not
Yeah, it
really a
was.
horror movie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got horror elements because it's a vampire movie, but you know, it's a grounded comedy. I mean, largely because it's mostly about this family, and a lot of the humor even comes out of their interrelationships and stuff. But like, I saw it with my youngest kid saw it when he was 12. And he leaned in and he's like, I thought you told me this was a horror movie. And it wasn't because he was old and cynical. It was like, but it's more like Shaun of the Dead than it is like The Exorcist. There are still horror comedies being made. So I don't think you can really compare this to like, you know, to Hereditary or like, you know, the modern A24 horrors. Even in that era, it wouldn't have been comparable.
Right.
You know, but again, the whole pastiche. Like, what I'm proud of about Lost Boys, which I have nothing to do with, it's really Joel's vision, but just like, I'm proud to be part of something that is a weird one-off. Because it's sort of like, yes, it's very 80s in terms of what Joel used, the grab bag he used to work with, but any era he would have made that movie and it would have been his idiosyncratic thing, and that's pretty cool. I think it is kind of a one-off in that way.
I was thinking about that because I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you are kind of removed from, I mean, the seaside town really allows you to kind of have this bubble. And I think that there is this sort of like, timeless Americana to it that it's just there, like and it's still there. Like when I visit Santa Cruz over the summer, I was kind of blown away that
How
this
similar
charm
it
is.
is?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Venice Beach is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Yeah.
Jesus, like,
Or
this
the
is-
Jersey Shore, yeah.
I think I was like looking hard enough, I could find like a crew jacket for the Lost Boys behind a bench or something. But like, it was just like, it is kind of neat, and I do think that's what's kept it, very, like you're saying, a one-off. And I don't know, I think I feel like they appreciate it even then at that point though, because even then it's like these movies. It's not like they would try to do other vampire movies, but it's not like there was a wave of that in the sense. Like it was kind of like, all right, this is it. This is the watermark in a certain way. So I don't know. I think that's one of the reasons why it prevails for sure.
Right, yeah, I agree with that.
And don't you think, I mean, as related, it's that beach scene, the campfire, the scene where you guys killed that other,
Yeah, that's the horror movie
That's
scene.
that's when it really becomes a horror movie,
Yeah.
for a second.
Yeah. My son's eyes glazed over a little at that point.
Right.
Yeah,
And he bites the head.
yeah. Rip the guy's mohawk off. That was satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, Jason, you were in one of the most violent horror movies of the last, I don't know, ever, with Terrifier.
That's great to hear.
So, was there a moment where you were like, okay, I've never seen this type of fucking violence before?
And that kind of slasher stuff is not really my interest,
Yeah.
but I had read about Damien Leone, and I love that he did this out of nothing.
Yeah.
He's great.
He pulled himself out of nothing. They bucked the whole studio system, and I hate the studio system. I've
Yeah.
sort of had an odd career because I've moved against it at many times in my life. And this guy he started from learning how to make makeup from books, and wanted to do that. And he wrote this thing, and he made it happen. And the first movie he ever saw when I met him, he said, was Lost Boys. His mother took him when he was 4 years old. Wow. And so it's affected his entire life. And after I cleaned the drool off my arm, I said to him, look, you just got to stay honest to yourself, because he'd just done the second one. He owned the IP and all that stuff. He
Yeah.
said, don't sell it, bet on yourself. Bet on yourself. And so I find those movies very much reminds me of punk rock in the 70s in New York. It's raw, it's what it is, it's a vision, it sort of makes a statement without hitting you on the head with it, or you can just listen to the noise of it.
Yeah.
And so that's why that's a little different than maybe some of the more curated horror movies of the past. But it does, it's just a different part of rock music, that stuff. And I think that he couldn't happen to a nicer guy, yeah.
Yeah, he's great.
Would you want to take a couple questions? Is that cool?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, obviously, I love this movie. It's so iconic and legendary. I think it's so well-rounded in the sense of like the humor and the seriousness. Where do you think that this movie falls on the scale of vampire movies, specifically, of like greatness to kind of like falls into comedy, like Twilight, like great and equivalent to other movies? Like, do you think that there's other vampire movies that best this movie in the representation of the genre?
Good question.
I mean, in 25, 30 years, you'll see. if the Twilight guys are up here, I don't know. I mean, this is a special film that works on so many levels in the narrative storytelling and filmmaking and the collaboration. It was A-list all the way, and the talent and story about single motherhood, brotherly love, first love, alienated youth, with the comedy and the drama. I mean, like Jason was saying, I mean, the spine of this film is as good as any film. It holds up because it's a good film, whether it's a vampire film or a drama or a comedy. It's holding up. So, I mean, it is up there, I guess.
Yeah, what I like about it from like in that sense is because Dracula, Lugosi's Dracula is great, Vampire is great, the original Nosferatu is great, and those are always going to be great. Jason said that like to him the blood was a drug metaphor, and I get that. And like for me, we're street runaway kids, right? Like basically with a pimp essentially, if you want to look at it. I mean, and that's, yeah, it's funny and it's not, right? Like, it's serious too. So I think there's a timelessness to the seriousness that Joel took with it underneath it all, that I think also is a way in for people. And I think as a vampire movie, because vampires have that aspect, they're sort of outsider characters, historically speaking, like within mythology, and they feed off of people. I think that's what's cool about the latest Nosferatu, is he just went right for like, I'm just literally gonna attach myself to your chest. It's very, but it's visceral, right? So I think that's why the campfire scene works, is like, you kind of wonder who we are, and you're like, oh shit. You know, these people are actually trying to survive. So I think that's one of the things that makes it work so well as a vampire movie that stands the test of time, is it has that sort of outsider, rebellious, sort of trying to survive component to who the vampires are. It's not just romance or whatever. Not to dismiss something else that exists in this game.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, could you share how was your experience when you watched the film for the first time? Was it at the premiere, or did you watch
So
early cuts or anything?
I'm originally from Ohio, so this was the first thing I had ever done, and we had about, I don't know, 10 to 12 Corbitts at the premiere, and it was at the Director Guild, I think is where it premiered. And so for anybody in movies, look, where your name comes up on the credit is sort of it's a big deal, right? And Laddie was, in my mind, like, you weren't even gonna see me till the end credits, and then all of a sudden it said also starring, and then Chance Michael Corbitt. My entire family kind of stands up. Yeah! So it was really badass. And then, once you were done and kind of paused for a second, even as young as I was, I realized what it was, because I saw some of the dailies, and we did some looping, so I saw some of the scenes, but not ever acting before, not seeing what something, when you're so invested in it, looks like, because I know what I liked. I liked certain music I liked certain movies that I liked, but I was totally invested in all the characters. I was totally invested in, the soundtrack, and when it was done, just sat back and was kind of like, I'm assuming, since all of you are here looking at us, how you felt for the first time when you watched it. I was totally, totally, totally impressed with the finished product and extremely proud of it. That was my experience the first time.
I couldn't believe how handsome Billy was. I just couldn't handle it. I still can't really, I still can't.
I couldn't believe how funny you were. And handsome.
You got time for one more?
Katie.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming out here and doing this for us. We're very appreciative of it, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I was wondering, is there any scenes that you filmed that were cut that you would have liked to see maybe in the final movie?
All of Laddie's lines.
Marco's soliloquy.
To work.
How did I arrive at this hair?
I actually had a line that I couldn't quite get, and they cut it. They cut it from the, I was like, it was the one time that Joel was really mad at me. Like, he always mad at Feldman all the time, but
He's still mad at Feldman.
yeah, from beyond. Yeah. But Joel was like frustrated. I just couldn't get this line, and it ended up getting cut. But it was in that scene where I was like, in the comic book store, and I was like, your brother and I, my brother and I.
Can't get
That's why they cut it. I said, my brother and I are on a mission to destroy all vampires, including your brother, if we have to. And
You gotta do that one again, that sucked again.
I still don't know how to do it.
Right.
It's like I did the line.
Yeah.
Because he was like, no, do it, and then I would do it kind of in practice, and he would be like, yeah, do it like that. Roll the cameras, and I blew it. Like, that only happened that one line, so I feel like.
Well, I think so. I didn't have anything.
No other lead scenes? No?
Well, I mean, I understand at the time why they did it, but Kiefer and I worked really hard on that love scene that we had. I think today I think it would be handled a little bit differently and accepted in a certain way.
It's on
But I
YouTube,
get it.
though.
Yeah.
Well, you would work together the year prior, right? So like the two of you.
Kiefer?
No, wait, Jamie. Yeah.
Oh, I was talking about the
Yeah.
Kiefer love
Oh,
scene.
okay. I gotta see the scene.
That's in the movie though, Jason. I hate you. That basically is the movie.
Well, we'll get an extended cut of that. Well, thank you, everyone. Seriously, this has been a blast.
One more round of applause. Thank you all so much for coming out here. Thank you for the years of memories and inspiration and entertainment and laughs. Thank you so much,
Thanks,
all
you
of
guys.
you.
Good question.
Yeah, yeah.